So let's get started. Welcome to another installment of webinars for busy lawyers, from habit awareness to habit change, applying the stages of change in law practice. So we're excited to have you join us today, and this is presented by attorney Liz Carrion. She's the senior law practice advisor at Lawyers Concern for Lawyers. My name is Amy Levine, Director of Programs and Volunteers at LCL, and I will be your host for today. I'll introduce Luz momentarily. And if you're joining us for the first time, LCL offers one-on-one consultations with licensed clinicians on mental health challenges and substance use disorders. Additionally, we provide educational programming like today, support groups, and one-on-one consultations on law practice management for the Massachusetts legal community. Our services are confidential and free. Now I am honored to present our speaker, Luz. Prior to joining LCL, Luz was an investigator and assistant bar counsel at the Office of Bar Counsel of the Massachusetts Board of Bar Overseers. She previously served as complaint counsel at the Massachusetts Board of Registration in Medicine. She's an expert in ethical, regulatory, and practice issues, and currently she does one-on-one consultations on law practice management, which includes coaching attorneys on office management and operations, technology, ethics issues, and marketing, just to name a few. Additionally, she writes articles and speaks regularly at bar associations, the MCLA, law firms, and other legal entities. For more information on Luz's background and expertise, I encourage you to read her full bio on our website. Finally, we love and encourage questions. Please use either the chat or the Q&A functions, and we'll answer those at the end of the presentation. So next, let's get started. I'm going to hand it off to Luz.
Thank you, Amy. Always a pleasure doing these webinars with you. I'm going to start by sharing my screen with the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, are we good, Amy? I'm assuming you can see.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Beautiful. Well, thank you for joining us and thank you for your time. I know that this is a hot topic. We always want to improve our habits or stop some of not so good habits, right? And incorporate new habits. And it's hard, I have to say. I don't have to remind you of that. It is difficult, but it's not impossible. It is not impossible. It's slow and steady wins the race on habit change. And today, we are going to, this is our agenda. We gave you some suggested homework beforehand when you registered. We encourage participants to review the webinar for busy lawyers from Dr. Sean Healy on changing habits. If you haven't watched it, that's okay. We're going to discuss some of the highlights of that program, but I encourage you to watch it afterwards. There's a lot of wisdom in that webinar. Then we're going to learn from Dr. Healy how to incorporate new habits that are good for us and our practices. We're going to apply that with an exercise. And then we're going to talk about action plan or tips for next steps. So with that in mind, you will receive the slides with the recording of this program. There's another link here for Dr. Healy's presentation. And let's start by discussing some of the points from that webinar. And so we learned from Dr. Healy that habits do serve us in some way. And so when he was raising the question is, why do we continue habits that don't serve us? We've all been there. And the answer is basically they do serve us in some way, and we have positive effects from those habits. We also have negative effects, and then we have neutral effects. Right now, let's talk about positive and negative effects. I'm going to give you an example that you may be familiar with. I'm certainly I'm familiar with this example. Sometimes when we procrastinate and leave things for the last minute, um, and then you get some of us would get the adrenaline rush, um, and then we, let's say, we're drafting uh, an opposition to a motion, for example. You left it for the last minute, but you were able to pull it off. And then it felt kind of rewarding when you filed a good opposition. And then let's say that um, you won the motion, that opposition was successful in your case. So there's sometimes that positive effect that we feel like if I leave things for the last minute, I can focus more. Um, that is not necessarily the case every time. So what we have, some of the negative effects is that if you're pulling an all-nighter, over time, that is not sustainable. And you might feel bad the next day, like the picture here. But over time, it's not sustainable. The other example is that you miscalculate. For example, when you're procrastinating, you think like, okay, I can pull an all-nighter, I can do it, but it turns out that you needed more time. So then you have to deal with, whether you can get a continuance and all the consequences of leaving things for the last minute. Um, that's just one example. There are many. So think about what positive effects and negative effects have some of the habits that you're trying to get rid of. Neutral effects are effects that we don't notice or value significantly, and those are very important in practice management. And let's explore why. Um, have you ever said any of these phrases? If it isn't broken, why fix it? Everyone does it this way. It's not a big deal. And then the biggie, or the one that I hear the most is it only takes a few minutes. So if you're dealing with inefficiencies in your practice and you're like, it only takes me a few minutes, not a big deal, chances are that it will take more than a few minutes, and chances are that it turns out to be a big deal. Pay attention if you're saying these things. So, for example, if you're dealing with an inefficiency in your practice, let's say during intake, it only takes a few minutes. I would encourage you to get the data. So, if you think it's a few minutes, the next time you get that task, put a clock and measure the time. So is it 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? And then multiply that, but by how many times you have to perform that task in a day, in a week, in a month, and in a year. Because chances are that those tasks you might not be able to bill for, and then you're wasting money. So really pay attention when you think about, it's only a few minutes. Um, then we have um, other nuggets of information here that I wanted to focus on. Um, you have to consider that some of these inefficiencies or bad habits that we carry are patterns. And this is something that Dr. Healy also mentioned in his webinar. These are patterns. And when we're talking about ethics in practice, what happens is that sometimes when there's an ethical misstep, it's not an isolated incident. It's a lot of times a result of a bad habit that has been going on for quite some time. Um, the other thing is that I want to focus on this bullet. Think about how much time and energy you spent managing the risk associated with bad habits. So, for example, going back to the procrastination. Now, we all procrastinate in some sort of way. The problem is that when it becomes chronic and it's affecting your health and your practice, right? And it could get you in trouble ethically. The more risk you take in your practice, the more energy and time you're going to be spending managing those risks, right? So double booking yourself in different courts, trying to put too many meetings into one day, um, cutting corners, those are all risks that it's going to take you time and energy, and you have to put a value on that. If this is taking too much energy drain, managing those risks, that's not good. That's not healthy for us. And usually it is shown in other, it will pop up in other areas of our life. Now, this is a mini exercise that we're going to do. Um, and before I go into the exercise, I want to pause and ask if you have any questions or comments. We are a community, and we learn better when we are in community. So feel free to put some comments in the chat section or questions. So I'll take a brief pause here. Amy?
So far, I was going to say we don't have anything specifically coming through.
Okay,
We
great.
can give it another. Yeah.
Okay, just let me know.
Okay.
Perfect. So this is a quick exercise for you to think about. We're going to think about a good habit that you have. Let's talk about first a good habit, uh, and let's pause and reflect on that good habit. Um, think about what positive benefits do you get from this habit. You're welcome to share that good habit in the chat section, and you are welcome to share the answers to these questions. But these are important. So you have to spend some time thinking about what negative effects, if any, do you get from this habit. I know if it's a good habit, you might not get any negative effects, but it's always good, like Dr. Sean Healy said in his webinar, to know thyself. We have to be aware and mindful of how we carry on these habits, if it, let's say, a good habit. Can you identify any neutral effects of this good habit? Sometimes it's difficult to identify a neutral effect because by definition, sometimes you're not even aware. So what we're trying to do here is to develop that awareness and reflection. The most important question, what has helped you maintain this habit? That is very valuable data because you can incorporate that into the new habit that you're trying to build or create, or in stopping a bad habit that you're trying to get rid of. I'm sorry, I think there was a question. Let's
Yes,
see.
Luz, just
Mhm.
really quickly, somebody was just wondering if you're asking about habits related to work or personal.
Either one. I did the presentation to focus on practice management and ethics, but if it's a personal one, I'm happy to listen to that as well, because sometimes we can get um, good data from a habit in our personal life, and we can translate that into our practice. So either one.
We also have some additional comments. So one of the good habits, this person says, always research thoroughly and under the legal position.
Great. Okay, so hold on to that data and explore a little bit more about that. So is it that you have developed the habit of uh, being thorough, right? And thoughtful? Those are patterns that you want to replicate, right? In developing another habit. Great, that's great. Anything else before I move on, Amy?
Yeah. So one person also says meditating most mornings, using a
Mm.
water pick most evenings for the first bad sleep, and for the later avoiding another deep cleaning at the dentist. So thank you for a little humor
Yes, I
in
love
this
it. I love it.
webinar. That's
So
great.
meditation, and that's good. If you're able to meditate, that's great. I have to admit, I've tried meditation, doesn't work for me. What I'm trying to build on is being mindful. I think at some point I will get to meditation. Hasn't worked for me yet. But if you're able to meditate, that's good because that's you want to have that awareness and reflection that comes with meditation. So kudos to you.
Yes.
Hopefully I'll be
And
there.
the
Huh?
water pick is pretty good too.
Yes.
Um, so we do have somebody who said they're not sure if any of their habits are good. What should she do then?
No problem. So what we need to do is we're gonna reflect. We can start by asking the same questions, okay? Because like Sean said, the habits are kind of like a mixed bag, okay? You're gonna get some good effects, negative effects, and some neutral effects, right? So if you think your habit is not good, don't worry about it. Just identify it. One tip, one suggestion is going through these questions and then determine like, is this really a good habit based on these answers? We're going to have another exercise later on. So hang tight here. Anything else before I move on, Amy?
Yeah, so somebody else writes, they're good at keeping a very clean and organized home and office space.
Oh,
That's a great habit.
yes, yes. I'm telling you that a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind, right? That's a really good habit. Keep it up. Um, so let me move on to the next one. And I don't know why my computer. Oh, there it is. Okay. So let's talk about. I'll go back. I see that there's some more questions, but let me go through these steps that are really important from Dr. Healy's presentation. Okay, so he talks about these stages of change and the challenges. This is super important, and it's good that you understand this and also have some grace and some self compassion, okay? Because some things will happen. We're going to talk about that. So these are the stages. We have 6 stages. Number one is pre-contemplation. So for example, in that stage, you're not really aware of what the problem is. And sometimes someone from the outside will tell you, hey, listen, this is a bad habit. But mostly on the first stage, you're not really aware of what the bad habit is. Then you have contemplation. And so when you're contemplating, whether to change, stop the habit, create a new habit, okay? The most challenging part in this stage is the ambivalence. So you're thinking like, for example, I think I need some technology, maybe a practice management program. So you're contemplating, but they're like, oh, this is too much time or money. I don't have the time or the money to explore this or implement. So you're ambivalent, right? And then if you're not aware of that, you're gonna get stuck there. Once you overcome that ambivalence and you're preparing to set that good habit in motion or new habit, you are more aware, right? And what happens is that there's a lot of hype between preparation and action. There's a lot of energy, good energy, like, yes, I'm going to do it, like, losing weight, for example, or exercising. That's in the personal space. Um, but the problem is that when you're preparing, also, there's an unrealistic expectation that you may have. So, for example, you may think that it's going to be quick and fast to adopt this new habit, and it might not be. Okay. Or, um, when you're trying to prepare, let's say, going back to the example of practice management software, you might think that, okay, now I have to map out my processes. I have to develop kind of an audit of what I have, pinpoint the problems, and so there's a challenge that might be overwhelming just preparing for that. So you have to be aware of that so that you can overcome that challenge. But once you're preparing, getting ready to implement a good habit, you're going to move on to the action phase. Like, this is it. I'm going to do it. Let's go, right? So let's say in the practice management software example, now in the action step, you're like, okay, I did all my research. I have everything narrowed down to, let's say, three practice management solutions. I'm going to decide on one, and I'm going to do my implementation, migration, whatever, into that new system. Okay. So you're in action mode. Good. But you have to be aware of the challenges that also come with um, during the action phase. Sometimes there's a setback. Oh my gosh, so the data didn't migrate as quickly or as easy as we thought it would be. When you're like, you know what, I'm tired of this. This is too much for me. You have to be aware of that challenge, because then you might stop at that point and not implement either a good habit or the good, some technology in the practice management example. Now, in terms of action, now you're into action mode. Now things kind of plateau, like Dr. Healy said, and then the question becomes maintenance, maintaining the good habits. So let's say we implemented the practice management software. We everything went well, but we are struggling. Okay, let's look at the. So we develop that baseline, but sometimes bad habits tend to creep back in, and you may not have the motivation that you had earlier. So, for example, if you don't enter the information in the practice management software religiously, that could be a challenge. You may be tempted, even though that you have the system, not to use it as you should. Okay. So you have to be aware that in the maintenance phase, there's some challenge that you might relapse. So you have to plan for that possible relapse. So what happens is then the next stage is if we relapse or terminate the habit. Okay. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the next exercise, but basically we're going to have some missteps. So let's say that you forgot to enter something into the system, but you catch yourself, you're like, nope, let me go back and fix it. And now from now on, I'm going to be aware that this is non-negotiable. I need to enter this information into the system. And just keeping up that good habit of entering the information. And then if you miss one, that's okay. We're going to go back and, fix it. That's how you go back to maintenance and don't terminate. You're not saying, okay, that's it. I'm not going to use this system anymore. That will be like a termination, right? Of that. Now, this is a quick example. I'm going to go through this quickly. This is my personal example. Okay. So when I watched Dr. Healy's presentation, I thought about this. Like, oh my gosh, he is right on point, because I went through all of this with when I was trying to implement a good habit of better managing my inbox in my email. So what happened was, um, I go to conferences. Every time you register for a conference, you have to give your email. Before you know it, you get all these emails from all these vendors, right? I do a lot of demonstrations for practice management technology and legal technology. Every time I do a demo, they get my email, and then I get all of these junk mail from all these vendors. So I was in the part that was, oh, you know what? It takes only a few minutes to just go and delete. I'm not even open them. I'm just deleting. It's only a few minutes. Well, the more conferences that I attended and the more demos I did, then before I knew it, it was out of control. Okay. Then there was so I was contemplating, I know the fix, I know the solution. It's doing the rules in Outlook. It's not like I don't know the solution, I know it. But then I was like, well, what if the FOMO, fear of missing out, if you don't know what FOMO means? But it's that fear of missing, well, what if there's some good information there and if I do the rule, I won't even see it. So there's that, kind of ambivalence, that kept me from moving on to the preparation stage. Once I got out of the FOMO, ambivalence, um, I said, you know what? Like I said earlier, I know the solution. I have to create a rule. It's easy. But then I was like, oh my gosh, now I have to sit down, set some time to do the rules. And I was like, you know, I had unrealistic expectation because I thought it was going to take a lot of time to set up the rules. And then I spoke to someone who told me, hey, listen, what you need to do is once you get the email, right then and there, create the rule. And then those emails from that person, that sender, are going to go straight to the folder that you do or junk mail, what have you. Um, and it was amazing because I didn't have to block 3 hours to start doing all these rules. As soon as I got the emails, I was able to immediately do the rule, and that was gone. Okay, so then that got me into the action phase. Like, okay, and then I gained momentum and I was motivated because once I do that, I'm like, this works. It absolutely works, right? But then when I went into the maintenance phase, when it was working, everything was nice. Here's the problem that some emails got through and did not follow the rule for a variety of reasons. But then it was like, at this point, what do I do? Do I, terminate my habit or go back to, it takes only a few minutes and just delete it? No, what I did was, um, I reviewed that email and what I did was like, no, this is junk, right? So I created another rule and those will go to the junk mail. And so when I saw Sean's presentation, I was like, this is rightly on point and we can use it in practice management. And he knows that. I don't have to restate it. Quickly, I wanted to spend some time on when bad habits create an ethical risk. Remember, I talked to you about the energy that you have to spend and the time and resources managing risk and bad habits. For example, there's a few examples here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but if you have a habit of ignoring unread emails or voicemails, there's a risk that you're going to get frustrated clients. Your reputation could be damaged, and you might get complaints uh, um, from clients, right? So you can look at this later, but remember that there's a lot of energy and risk with bad habits in practice management that could spill into an ethical problem for you. I talked about this a little bit earlier, that ethical risk, this is not a one-time thing. They often grow from everyday habits, okay? So for example, sometimes, you have to pause and maybe ask, Is there a task that I'm consistently avoiding? And why is that, right? Why am I avoiding it? What is the short-term benefit that I'm getting from that avoidance? What professional risk am I creating with this avoidance? And sometimes there are circumstances where you may need to seek professional help, from a therapist. Nothing wrong with that. To explore these issues deeper, because there could be some underlying cause that you might not be aware of, and it should be best addressed in therapy. Um, so before I go into the mini exercise, I want to go through some of the questions or comments, Amy.
Yeah, so somebody did ask, what are some ways to overcome the inertia challenge?
Yes, yes, that's a great question. So uh, there's a few ways. Sometimes it's what I see is that when you get the inertia, it's it also creates that dread of this is just too much, and sometimes it's just figuring out what the next step is, the next step or the next two steps. So then only figuring out those one or two steps that you need to do next could help you overcome that inertia. um, so for example, let's mention you have to draft a brief. It's a difficult case, or a difficult client, right? And you're like, kind of avoiding, you're not doing anything. Um, Stop. And then one of the things that you can do is like, okay, so just figure out the legal issues that you have to address in your brief. That's one step. Just identifying, don't even go to draft and just say, okay, let me identify the legal issues, right? Um, Then the second step would be, okay, so do I need to do research on each of the issues? So that's your second step. Just breaking it down into actionable steps, it goes a long way, because sometimes once you start the first or second step, then sometimes you get momentum and you get into the flow and you ride the wave. Um, so breaking it down into small actionable steps. Um, That's one example. Sometimes getting an accountability buddy. So if you have someone in your office that you trust, or someone you trust that is going to be, that you can tell, hey, listen, can you please nag me on this? I need to do this. This is the deadline. Um, Always leave a cushion, right? Um, and have an accountability buddy who's going to be helping you, like, hey, listen, what have you done, what steps did you take? That's another tip that I like. Anything else?
Yes, so we do have another question. Does the change always end up in relapse? And how do you deal with that?
No, 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 no. So sometimes, let me stop my screen because we're going to move on to something else. um, no, the answer is no. uh, so what could happen is that you kind of relapse. um it's okay, it's gonna happen. You have to understand that sometimes, like for example, if you take a vacation and you disrupt a habit, it's gonna be hard to get back. Just understand, have some self-compassion and grace, that you know what, okay, I stopped that good habit, I just have to get back on track. Another thing that I learned from, forgot the name of the author, but it's the author who wrote Atomic Habits. Like he said, don't let it go more than 2 days. Because when it's 1 or 2 days, it's easier to get back. When you disrupt it for longer, then it's more difficult and challenging to come back. Okay. Um, and then if you stop and terminate the habit, um, my suggestion is, go back and spend some time thinking about what were the benefits of that good habit that I had and that I just stopped, and try to see how can I get back even with a little step. Okay. I think it goes a long way to break it down into small actionable steps.
Excellent. Somebody also just added in or hire a coach for accountability. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good suggestion.
Yeah. Some people hire coaches, and that's a good idea. It works for some people. Um, so that's another option. Um, I did a worksheet for the participants. You're gonna get this also with your presentation, the PowerPoint slides. I wanted to see if you go at the beginning of the webinar chat, do you see the document? I'm asking the participants.
Yeah, I think again
Scroll back
that
to the
was
beginning.
really,
Nope, no, it's not coming. Okay,
yeah.
no problem. I'm gonna show it to you. Let me share my screen. Hold on.
While you're doing that, I just wanted to point out one of the things that you mentioned was procrastination. And I
Yes.
think that if somebody does see that there's a lot of procrastination, sometimes I'm not diagnosing by any means, but that is a part of having ADHD. And so just wanted to mention that Dr. Sean Healy does have a group specifically for folks with ADHD. It meets on Wednesdays from 9 to 10. So if there's any concern, that I think could be a group where you might get some good tips.
Yes, that group is really good because it creates a community and the participants learn from each other. And you can also schedule an appointment or a consult with Sean or any of the clinicians if you want to explore a little bit more one-on-one the ADHD issue. But I think also, talk to your therapist. If you have a therapist and you have ADHD, um, try to work it out because therapy goes a long way when it comes to habits. I highly recommend that. So I wanted to you're gonna get this. It's a one-page PDF form, and then you're gonna be able to type in the form. So like there's plenty of space there. But what I want you to do is that so the action plan. Um, for today is number one, set aside at least 1 hour. I would say 1 to 2 hours, but set aside 1 or 2 hours um, by the end of this week, and do that relatively soon so that everything is fresh in your mind, and start filling out this worksheet. This is not a journal, so you're not gonna be writing a journal or journaling by any means. The goal is for you to be uh, concrete and actionable, right? So we're gonna first start with identifying the habits. So is there a habit that you want to change? And I would say choose one only. Don't put all of them. I think that you want to do, like I said, gaining momentum once you master one habit. And if you're able to do that and then move on to the next one, don't put like 3 or 4 habits, just one. And then, what new habit do you want to build instead of that bad habit? Again, one. Um, then we're going to go back to Dr. Healy's explanation. We need to dig deeper into that, okay? So how has the old habit helped you? This is important because that will give you the material to understand why is it that you go back to the whole old habit, right? Um, is there a benefit? What benefit of the old habit needs to be addressed or replaced in the new habit? Sometimes we can incorporate a little bit of that habit that is serving us and put it into the new habit. Now, this part, the next part is building the plan. Okay. And number one here is important because, like I said, break it down into steps. Okay. What is the first small step that you need to complete? Okay. And then make it manageable enough so that you can repeat it. Okay. What will make this easier to maintain? When will you start? Again, Dr. Healy mentioned this, choose a specific time or trigger, because that gives you more clarity, right? Um, how will you track your progress? Whether it's even a call to your accountability body. Hey, listen, I'm developing this new habit. I've been working on it for a month now. Or if you want to write it down somewhere, but track your progress because again, that's data. That's data that is going to help you to maintain the habit, and you have to be aware of that and mindful. Okay, plan for barriers and setbacks and struggles, because they will happen. They will happen, and like I said, some of the disruptions, like for example, if you go on vacation, if life, something happens in your life, like for example, someone gets sick, you have to stop, the habit or and take care of that person, or you get sick, you know, there will be challenges and there will be opportunities that, or will encounter um, opportunities that you might be tempted to revert back, right? You have to plan for these barriers. And some of these barriers we can anticipate, right? In the case of procrastination, like some of those you can anticipate. If you have the deadline already, you know that, somehow you have to plan so that, maybe you can, you know, complete your task one day or 2 days before the deadline, not, you have done everything, uh, with a little bit of cushion before the deadline. Um, So these are good questions for you to reflect on and reflect on and plan, for these barriers. And we have some tips here that come from Dr. Sean's presentation. And as always, schedule a consult with LCL. You can have a consult with a clinician, with me as a practice advisor. You can have a joint consult with a clinician and me. And again, free and confidential.
So, Luz, first of all, thank you so much. I think, again, I love how you break it down and really make it feel more actionable. So that's one thing. But I also liked what you did. You tied in changing habits with potential consequences. And one of the things we talk about here is trying to prevent um, burnout, and you want to maintain your well-being. And this sounds like you had mentioned burnout by not changing certain habits. And this is another preventative tool that we talk about: sleep and exercise and all of these other things that are going to help prevent burnout and depression and things like that. So, again, this is another tool that I don't know if people always think about in terms of that prevention and maintaining our well being. So, I like that. And then, of course, there are the ethical consequences of not making some of these changes. And that's also important to note. So, I like how you pulled that together.
Thank you.
Um,
And I just wanted to, so there's someone here doing an example. So do you want
oh,
to do an example with the worksheet? Yeah, we can do an example here right now. We have time. So do you want to propose this is in response to one of the comments.
yeah.
Do you, it says doing an example here may be helpful, of course. So do you have an example or do you want me to come up with an example? I don't know.
Are you asking this
No,
person
I'm
or you
asking
want me?
the participants. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
All right. So, yeah, so the person who mentioned that, do you have an example? If not, again, I can provide one, or Lose again. Please feel free. Oh,
Oh,
procrastination. Somebody's
procrastination.
saying that's a
Okay.
big one.
Okay, I
Absolutely.
know it. I know it. Like, yeah. absolutely. So we can do this together. Let me go back and share the screen. Okay, where am I? Now, remember that procrastination is really broad. So why don't we narrow it down? Um, so in terms of procrastination, let's say, do you want to talk about billing, for example, procrastinating? So we can narrow it down because we're not going to have time to do like broadly. Procrastination takes, appears and shows up in different ways.
So
So
the
we have
person mentioned drafting motions.
drafting motions. Okay. So we want to, so what habit do you want to change?
And then somebody else, by the way,
Mhm.
added trial prep. So
Oh,
I
okay.
think it's very
Now, for now, we're gonna put both here, trial prep,
okay.
and then I'm not gonna type everything because I want to go through the exercise. So we're looking at those. So of course, the new habit is, preparing the drafting the motion and doing trial prep way, in advance. Um, Now, when you procrastinate, is there anything helpful that comes out that has helped you coming out of the procrastination? The most common thing is that adrenaline rush that you go through when you're doing the task at the last minute, and then you get rewarded when you win. Let's say the trial or your motion. Is that something that because that's very common. So it's like some people feel like they're more focused if they leave things for um, the last minute. So we can work with that. Is there any benefit? Is there any benefit to procrastination? And Amy, I think people are showing up with comments, but I don't see them.
A few comments. So yes, it feels more creative.
Ah, that's a good one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so that's something that we want to keep. Creativity, right? We want to keep that creativity, which you can accomplish that without leaving things for the last minute. Okay, there's a way. Um, so I would say in terms of building the plan, a good approach is to work backwards. So what's not one, identify the deadline. So meaning the day you have to file you have to file your motion or your opposition or the trial date or the hearing date, right? I would leave let me see if I can. Okay, two leaf cushion. And again, this might vary. The cushion could be a couple of days. It could be 3 days, 5 days. That depends on you. That's very personal. And then I would start breaking down the steps. So, for example, if it's a motion, like I said, go back in your calendar and block time. Okay. Now, when you're blocking the time, not like I said, break it down into tasks. So, I'm gonna focus on the legal issues, just researching. So leave time um, for each task. Put a rough estimate of time frames. Okay. So do I need, let's say, three? I don't know. I'm just making this up. I don't know. 3 hours to ID legal issues. So that's one block that you're gonna set aside. I need 5 hours of research um, for all issues, something like that. Or if you have multiple issues, can you break it down in even if working on one issue at a time? Again, this is just an example. Okay. Now here's the temptation. Um, So this number two is related. When will you start? So that's tied to number one with the deadlines and the times you're gonna designate for each task, okay? What will make this easier to maintain? So it could be a reminder. So when you block the time, schedule reminders. Accountability, maybe your staff, hey, tell your assistant or your paralegal, you know, nag me um, to do this. Get your accountability buddy. Now, of course, you're gonna track your progress when you see that issue identified. So one of the things that when you think about that rush, um, is that when you schedule a task, some software will allow you to check off the task as being completed, and sometimes there's a ding to it, and it's like, oh my gosh, that sounds so good when you get the ding that when you complete a task. So that's kind of rewarding and reinforcing. Um, Now, going back to creativity, you can do this when you're tracking your progress. So there's, I would say, a combination of four and one. If you block the time uninterrupted, that's the thing. You have to kind of be diligent about that and mindful. If you're going to be working on a motion or trial prep, block the time, shut off, and don't look at your email, don't answer phones. Uh, be mindful of that. Um, Also, and then when you track progress, go back and look at, oh my gosh, this, I like what I did in terms of drafting my argument for this legal issue. And see, check your product. The other thing that I wanted to add here is that a lot of times things come up and there's a tendency to then get distracted with something that comes up. Okay. I think with procrastination, there's some things that you can delay maybe a day or two. So when you're blocking the time, if something comes up and you're saying, you know what, I cannot do it now, but you know what, I'm going to schedule it for tomorrow or the day after, and I'm going to be diligent because things happen. You have to think about that. But then the second time you reschedule, then be diligent. We're going to talk about that later with the barriers. Um, the other thing in terms of creativity, think about when you are the most productive during the day. Some people are morning people and they love to do that. They do their best work like early in the morning. Some people are not morning people and they do their best work in the afternoon or at night. Try to find out your sweet spot. When do you feel more productive? Which will also translate where it's the likelihood when you're going to be more creative. And try to keep that flow. Don't interrupt the flow. Um, so in terms of the barriers, like I said, if sometimes you have an emergency in a case and you have to reschedule, shuffle your schedule or your calendar around, that's okay. Give yourself some grace. But let's talk about, for example, what will you do when various triggers show up? So,
Luz,
mhm.
can I just quickly say sometimes barriers, I know you said other things come up, but I wonder if perfectionism is a barrier.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that. So let me hold on. So, for example, let me finish this thought. Um, do not reschedule more than once. Okay.
Mm.
And that's you have to develop, it takes time, but it's like mini little habits in terms of being disciplined. Like, okay, I'm gonna move it, reschedule it, but not more than once. Okay, that's my commitment. um Perfectionism could pop up, definitely. So let's go back to the example of tracking your progress. That's a good way to look at it, Amy. So if you're in my earlier example, you're going back and reviewing what you did, right? In terms of, I identified the legal issue, I did my research, I developed my argument, but then you're feeling like, no, it's not good enough. It has to be perfect. And then sometimes you might go into a rabbit hole, right? Perfectionism might do that to you, and then spend too much time in something that it's not really is it good enough, basically. It's not that it's going to be mediocre, but for perfectionism, if it's really a struggle, again, you know going to a therapist and exploring that really goes a long way. One of the questions that I think of when addressing perfectionism is, does this work? So let's say doing the argument for this legal issue, is this something that takes really 3 hours or 8 hours?
Mm.
And most of the time we know the answer, because if you're doing the work, this is not a novel question of law that has not been addressed. But if it's repetitive, like if you're doing the same motion, the same arguments over and over, think about, is it gonna really take 8 hours of my time, which is gonna be spent mostly on rehashing because of perfectionism, or is this really worth, 2 or 3 hours? You know,
And
when when
somebody,
when
yeah.
is good enough? Like I said, this is a good product. This is a good product I'm proud of. I don't have to spend more time on this.
The person said the barrier of perfectionism, yes, such as there must be more research I can do, or there must be
Yes.
better ideas I can come up with. Did I do everything for my clients in preparing the motion? When to stop the hamster wheel? And I'll just mention that Dr. Tracy Myers did a presentation on perfectionism. So I would encourage folks, because yes, that is a higher trait in lawyers, and so I would encourage folks to watch her presentation on that.
Okay.
Anyway,
And this, I would invite attorneys to consider. I think attorneys are a little bit different, like you said, but in the way that, use your judgment. Because sometimes, a lot of times we know the answer when to that question. Did I research everything? Did I did everything that I could? And a lot of times the answer is yes, you did. You didn't miss anything. Okay. The other thing is that, remember I told you about leaving that cushion? That cushion could help you, right? So let's say that you finished your trial prep, your motion, and there's, let's say, 3 days, you know, between the end, and the deadline, filing or trial, right? You have that cushion to reflect, okay? And so if there's something that needs to be done, you have that cushion to do that work. But I think that most of the time, I think we're too hard on ourselves, because most of the time we know the answer. It's like, if there's an issue, a lot of the times we're able to pinpoint, you know what, I think I'm missing something in this argument. I know there's something out there. So it's our intuition and our experience and our judgment that should be guiding us, not the perfectionism. Um, because we a lot of the times we know the answer.
so
I see that we're
Luz,
at the hour, and
we're
what do we have?
we're at the hour. I just wanted to let people know that Luz is available for these consultations, and I just put her email in the chat. It is Luz, Luz, at lclma.org. Again, somebody said this was amazing, much needed, and thank you so much. It was, again, an excellent presentation. I love how you had some examples to use and a worksheet. And by the way, again, everybody is going to get the worksheet as well as the slides. Um, so Luz, any final words? This was a great presentation.
Thank you. I really appreciate everyone who showed up. And if you were not able to show up and watch the recording, I appreciate you. And we are a community. We are a community and we thrive in community. So keep up the good work.
Excellent. We're getting lots of thank yous. So again, thank you to you, Luz. You did an awesome job.
No, thank you to all of you. Okay.
All
Have a
right.
nice day.
Have a great
Thank you.
day. Thank you
Bye bye.
all.
Bye bye.